Think about the last time you were genuinely bored. Not scrolling. Not listening to something. Not filling silence with noise. Just sitting with nothing. How long could you actually last? If that question made you slightly uncomfortable, that discomfort is exactly what this video is about. Because something has quietly happened to the way your brain processes reward. And most people have no idea it's happening to them. They think they're just tired, or unmotivated, or maybe a little depressed. But what's actually going on is both simpler and stranger than that. Your brain's reward system, the one that's supposed to push you toward things that matter, has been hacked. Not by a villain. Not by some shadowy tech conspiracy. By you. By all of us. Slowly, accidentally, one notification at a time. And here's the part that genuinely surprised me when I looked into this: the solution isn't a detox. It's not deleting your apps. It's something much more counterintuitive than that. Let's start with what dopamine actually is, because I promise you, you've been lied to about it. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical. I know that's what everyone calls it. That's what podcasts say, that's what wellness influencers say, that's probably what you've believed for years. But neuroscientists will tell you something different. Dopamine is not about pleasure. Dopamine is about anticipation. It's about the wanting, not the getting. Your brain releases dopamine when it expects a reward is coming. The spike happens before you get the thing, while you're reaching for it. The moment you actually get it, the dopamine drops. This is why you can spend 45 minutes scrolling Instagram and feel nothing by the end. Every swipe is your brain expecting a reward, a funny video, a like, an interesting post, and when something decent shows up, it gets the dopamine hit and immediately moves on to wanting the next thing. You never arrive anywhere. You're just perpetually reaching. Neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky has studied this for decades. His research on primates showed that dopamine spiked highest not when subjects got a reward, but when they had a 50-50 chance of getting one. Uncertainty is the most potent trigger. Sound familiar? That's a slot machine. That's also your Instagram feed. And here's where it gets interesting, because this is the part most conversations about dopamine completely skip. Your brain doesn't just passively receive dopamine hits. It calibrates. It adjusts its own baseline based on how much stimulation you've been giving it. Think of it like your eyes adjusting to light. Walk into a dark room from bright sunlight, and at first you can't see anything. But stay in the darkness long enough, and your eyes adapt. They become sensitive to lower levels of light. That same process happens with dopamine, but in reverse. When you constantly flood your brain with high stimulation inputs, social media, fast content, constant novelty, your brain does the equivalent of squinting. It downregulates. It becomes less sensitive to dopamine. Which means the things that used to feel rewarding, a good conversation, finishing a project, sitting in a park, stop registering as rewarding at all. You haven't become lazy. You haven't lost your passion. Your threshold has just shifted so high that ordinary life can't clear it anymore. Dr. Anna Lembke, a psychiatrist at Stanford who wrote the book Dopamine Nation, calls this the dopamine deficit state. It's not clinical depression in the traditional sense. It's more like a persistent gray. Things feel flat. Getting started feels impossible. You're not sad exactly, just dulled. And the cruel irony is that when you feel that flatness, what do you reach for? More stimulation. More scrolling, more snacking, more noise. Which deepens the deficit. It's a loop, and most of us are somewhere inside it right now. But here's the plot twist, and I want you to really sit with this one, because it flipped something for me. The problem isn't that we have dopamine triggers everywhere. The problem is that we've eliminated all the friction between wanting something and getting it. For most of human history, the gap between craving and reward was wide. You were hungry, and then you had to hunt, or grow, or cook. You were lonely, and then you had to physically go find someone. You were curious, and then you had to go to a library, ask an elder, wait. That gap, that friction, that frustrating space between want and receive, that was actually doing something important. It was building your capacity to tolerate discomfort. It was training your brain to work for things. We've compressed that gap to almost zero. Hungry? 2 taps. Lonely? Open an app. Curious? Google it before the thought even fully forms. And when you remove all the friction, you don't just get convenience. You get a brain that loses its ability to sit with wanting. A brain that has never learned, or has forgotten, how to be in the uncomfortable middle. This is why so many people report that even things they used to love feel hollow. Not because the things changed. Because the brain that used to enjoy them has been rewired by a world with no friction. So what do you actually do about this? Because I'm not here to tell you to throw your phone in a river and go live off the grid. That's not realistic, and honestly, it's not even necessary. The research, and Lembke's clinical work backs this up, suggests the path forward isn't elimination. It's reintroduction of friction. Strategic, intentional friction. Here's what that actually looks like in practice. First, build at least one daily, boring window. 15 to 20 minutes where you do something with no reward attached and no input coming in. Walk without headphones. Sit with your coffee before checking your phone. Wash dishes in silence. The goal isn't mindfulness in the spiritual sense. The goal is teaching your brain that it's okay to not be stimulated. That it can tolerate the gap between wanting and getting. This feels genuinely hard at first. That difficulty is the point. Second, create distance, not bands. Instead of trying to eliminate your high dopamine habits through sheer willpower, which almost never works long term, make them slightly harder to access. Put your phone in a different room at night. Log out of apps so you have to log back in. Delete the app and use the browser version instead. These aren't massive barriers, but friction works. Even 30 seconds of added resistance gives your rational brain time to catch up to your impulse. Third, reintroduce delayed rewards. Pick one thing each week where you deliberately wait for the payoff. Cook a meal from scratch instead of ordering out. Read a physical book instead of watching the summary video. Write out a problem on paper before Googling the answer. You're not being a Luddite. You're exercising a cognitive muscle that's gotten weak, the muscle that says, I can want something and not immediately have it, and that's okay. Fourth, audit your content diet, not by quantity but by depth. The issue isn't how much content you consume, it's the average depth of it. 10 hours of long-form documentaries affects your brain very differently than 10 hours of 30-second clips. Start paying attention to how you feel after different types of content. Energized and curious? Or restless and vaguely worse? Your nervous system will tell you what's actually feeding it versus what's just filling it. Here's where I want to land this, because I think this matters. We talk about dopamine culture like it's a personal failure. Like people who feel flat and unmotivated just need more discipline, more willpower, more hustle. But what's actually happened is a massive, unplanned experiment conducted on an entire generation, the first humans to ever live inside an attention economy specifically engineered around our brain's oldest vulnerabilities. You are not broken. Your brain is doing exactly what brains do, adapting to its environment. The environment just changed faster than anyone was ready for. The good news, and there is genuinely good news here, is that the brain is plastic. The same adaptability that let it drift toward flatness can work in the other direction. The research shows that even a few weeks of reduced high-stimulation inputs begins to restore baseline dopamine sensitivity. Things start to feel interesting again. The flat gray lifts. Not because life changed, because your capacity to feel it did. And maybe that's the most important reframe here. The goal isn't to feel more. The goal is to need less in order to feel it. That's not a sacrifice. That's actually the direction of freedom. If this made you look at your own habits differently, drop a comment. I'm genuinely curious. What's the one thing in your daily routine you think has the highest dopamine cost? And if you want to go deeper on the neuroscience side of how our environments are being designed around our psychology, I've got something coming up on that you're not going to want to miss.